ladies and gentlemen, and TV show lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video, we have yet another brand new episode review for you all. And I am going to be covering episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So yes, believe it or not, we have already reached the penultimate episode of this limited series. I personally am flabbergasted and find this so hard to believe, and it's actually quite sad. Having Ewan McGregor back in the Obi-Wan Kenobi robes and role is something we've wanted for over a decade. And we finally got it. They have said that it's just a 6-part limited series event, meaning that we likely won't get a season 2, and we are already on episode 5 of 6. This has come and gone so fast. Regardless though, the show has been actually surprisingly mixed for a lot of people at this point. So, will this episode be changing any minds? Well, we're about to find out. As always with my brand new episode reviews, this will contain spoilers, so I'm going to be issuing a major spoiler warning right now. If you have not watched episode 5 or any other episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi, you have been warned. Before I hop into the actual review itself, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my episode and series reviews, so be sure to check that out, and I guarantee you'll find something you'd like. And so without further ado, let's hop right into things. First up on my positives list for this episode, and it's something that comes very early on, and I was actually surprised to see, but very pleasantly surprised. And that was the return of the characters played by Kumail Nanjiani and O'Shea Jackson Jr. I really thought that Kumail for sure was either dead or we just weren't going to see him again. It was kind of a one and done thing. O'Shea Jackson Jr. I had hope for but wasn't necessarily certain, but regardless they were both back and I was so happy to see them. I also found that pretty much everyone in this episode got deeper and more meaningful time to shine. In particular, O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character, Indira Varma's character, Tala, and Moses Ingram as the third sister. They all got times to really flesh out their characters and hit those emotional beats, and they absolutely nailed them. Something that was very prominent in this episode as we kept cutting back to it was a flashback between a de-aged Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin. And though the de-aging was mostly good, there were a few spots that were a little spotty, but the meaning behind the sequence that we kept cutting back to, plus actually seeing Hayden Christensen back, was not only a breath of fresh air, but hit me in all the right places. I really loved it and was so happy to see the two of them sharing the screen together in this capacity. The next point is something that really stood out to me in this episode, a huge highlight, and that was the third sister's backstory. It's something that we all expected, but now we have official confirmation and actually got to see it play out, and it comes mixed with some seriously hard-hitting Order 66 flashbacks. And I thought that was awesome. Well, devastating and awesome, because obviously it's a pretty disturbing backstory for all intents and purposes, and I thought they handled it quite well, and it was definitely one of the better aspects of this episode. Next is something that I believe I've touched on in every single review of every episode so far, but it really stood out to me this time. And that is that the score in this episode went extremely hard. Like, it was so damn good. It really felt like Star Wars, and it really amped up every single scene. Definitely elevated the material in all the right ways. And now my final positive for this episode are those Vader moments. Him pulling back down the transport ship and just ripping it open, him just openly letting the third sister attack him and challenging her to a fight. The lightsaber duel itself was awesome, but also him just using his force abilities to completely destroy her. And then he was just so cold, like he just stabs her and is like, yeah, we don't need you anymore, you're useless to us now. Again, this is something I have harped on every single time I bring up Vader when talking about this show. This has got to be the darkest and most powerful version of Vader we have seen on screen. And I am totally and undoubtedly, undeniably loving it. Although I do have a couple negatives with this episode too. The first one being the absolute cop-out when it comes to the Grand Inquisitor. Yes, I know we knew it was coming all along because he's in Rebels and everything, but then it begs the question, why did they bother with this in the first place? He gets stabbed in what, the first or second episode? Disappears for 3 episodes just to pop up in the tail end of this episode. We all knew he was going to live anyway, so why did they even bother with this whole thing? I just don't get it. I don't see the point at all. The next being something that I hate, that happens in movies and shows all the time. And that is just all of these little conveniences. Like, of course, the message from Bail Organa gets left behind, and of course, it's just in an arm's length reach of the third sister who's just been mortally wounded. Like, it's just so conveniently placed there, and even though it's smashed, she hears just all the right words. I don't know, maybe I'm being too nitpicky here, but that shit just annoys me all the time. And this one, I was kind of on the fence if I wanted to include this one or not, because it's more so like a middle ground point, just like a talking point, not really a positive or a negative, but I did decide to include it in the negatives for this episode. And that is the fact that this episode overall just kind of feels like a portion of something larger. And I get that that is exactly what it is. It's just one episode in a 6-episode limited series. But it just feels like it should only be a portion of a movie or a portion of an episode. They just kind of land at this safe haven, and then Vader traps them there, and then we spend the entire time in this one place. I don't know, the episode just doesn't really stand out on its own. I feel like they could have just had like an extended episode 6 and put something else here, or they could have just attached this and had a 5-part episode limited series. I don't know, I just don't like episodes of shows or movies where they're just kind of like stuck in one place unless it's done really well, for which I found this one did a good enough job, but it wasn't anything that like blew me out of the water. Again, that's probably more of a nitpicky point and not really something that's a full-blown negative, but something that I did want to address, is that it's just, you get to this one place and for like 40 minutes you just stay in this one place and then they flee just to go to the finale. Nevertheless though, I did feel that this episode was a definite step in the right direction, a step back to where they were from the first 3 episodes, because if you remember that 4th episode, not only is it the worst reviewed episode of the show so far, but it was my worst review too, and I really didn't care for it all that much. Like, it was just fine. So thankfully this one impressed once again. Even though I do have a few little negatives, for the most part they are fairly nitpicky, and the positives definitely outweigh them. And so, I'm going to be giving episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi an 8 out of 10. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my review. While you're at it, feel free to let me know what you would have scored episode 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi out of 10. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.